Okay, so when I say medieval castle, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Is it soaring towers? Maybe some noble knights? A fairy tale princess? Well, for about 1,000 years, the reality was way different. The castle wasn't really a home, it was a machine for war, and it was constantly changing. Let's get into this incredible story of survival and innovation.
It seems like a pretty simple question, doesn't it? We all have this really strong image in our minds of what a castle is. But the romantic, almost magical vision we have today, it is a world away from its original brutal purpose.
Yeah, this is probably something close to what you were imagining. It's beautiful, it's dramatic, totally iconic. But here's the thing. This stunning castle in Scotland, it was mostly rebuilt in the 20th century. It's a lot more fantasy than it is fortress. The real reason castles even existed was way more desperate.
That's it. That's the answer. For an entire millennium, basically from the fall of Rome all the way to the Renaissance, the one thing driving the construction of Europe's most impressive buildings was the basic, urgent need to survive a world that had been plunged into total chaos.
So what was this big problem? Well, after the Roman Empire just crumbled, all of its sophisticated military tactics and its legal structures, they just vanished, right along with it. And that left a massive, dangerous power vacuum.
All that tactical genius that made the Roman legions so famous, gone, forgotten. Armies pretty much devolved into what one historian calls ill-organized gangs. Without a strong king or an emperor to protect them, everyday people were left completely vulnerable to a whole new wave of threats.
And man, what a threat it was. From the north, you had the Norsemen, the Vikings, who weren't just raiding from the sea, they were marauders on horseback too. From the east, you had the Magyars, and from the south, Saracen pirates. This was a time of constant, unpredictable danger. A new solution was needed, and it was needed fast. People couldn't just sit around and wait for some king to maybe come save them. Local communities and their leaders, they had to act right then and there. And their first answer was simple, it was practical, and it was made from the only things they had on hand, the dirt under their feet and the trees growing around them.
Now here's what's so fascinating. You have all these different cultures facing the exact same problem, and they all came up with pretty much the exact same solution. On the left, that's a Scandinavian fort. On the right, a Dutch one. See? Both are circular, with ditches, big earth walls, and a wooden fence or palisade on top.
So this is the key takeaway here. These were not the homes of kings. They were community shelters. Desperate people started turning to local strongmen for protection, and they'd offer up their loyalty in exchange for safety. This right here is the birth of feudalism, a whole social structure built on trading loyalty for protection, all centered around a simple fort.
But, the world never stands still. As the attackers got more organized and more sophisticated, simple wooden earth forts just weren't going to cut it anymore. And this is what kicks off a centuries-long arms race between the people building the walls and the people trying to knock them down. A huge turning point was the Crusades. European knights traveled east and were just absolutely stunned by the advanced military architecture they saw, especially the massive, layered defenses of cities like Constantinople. They brought all that new knowledge back home with them, ready to build bigger and a whole lot better.
And they were going to need it, because attackers had a terrifying new superweapon, the trebuchet. Now, this wasn't just some simple catapult. By using a massive counterweight, it could launch huge stones with enough force to smash right through walls. It could even lob things over them, like dead animals or diseased bodies, to spread sickness inside. Nasty stuff.
So, the answer to the trebuchet? Stone. And lots of it. Walls got incredibly high and incredibly thick, like the ones you see here at Gravenstein in Belgium. A wooden fort would be just obliterated by a trebuchet, but a massive stone wall could take the hit. So, round one of the arms race goes to the defenders.
Okay, so if you can't go through the wall, you go over it. That was the attacker's next move. The siege tower was basically a mobile high-rise on wheels. You'd roll it right up to the wall, drop a ramp, and let your soldiers just swarm over the top, completely canceling out the defender's height advantage.
In response, the defenders got really clever. They realized the crucial thing was controlling the point of attack. So the gatehouse, which used to be a weak point, was transformed into the deadliest part of the entire castle. It became this layered trap with multiple gates, arrow slits, and even murder holes in the ceiling to drop rocks or boiling oil, an absolute killing zone.
So you take all these innovations, the thick stone walls, the powerful, deadly gatehouses, and all this advanced engineering,
and you put them all together. This eventually led to the ultimate expression of medieval defensive architecture.
And this is what you get. Cracks de Chevaliers, a Crusader castle in Syria. I mean, just look at it. It's a castle inside a castle. If an attacker somehow managed to breach that massive outer wall, they'd just find themselves trapped in a kill zone, staring up at an even higher, even stronger inner wall. It was almost perfectly designed to resist any medieval siege weapon.
For centuries, the stone castle was king. It was the top of the food chain. But a brand new technology was about to show up in Europe that would make even the mighty Cracks de Chevaliers totally obsolete. Gunpowder. It was first developed in China, but it made its way to Europe in the 13th century. And once people figured out how to harness its explosive power inside a metal tube, it could fire a heavy projectile with a force that medieval engineering had just never seen before. The age of the cannon had officially begun.
And suddenly, the very thing that made a classic Gothic castle so strong, its incredible height, became its greatest weakness. A tall, thin stone wall was a perfect, brittle target for a cannonball. The whole philosophy of defense had to change, and fast.
Fortifications went low and thick. Walls were built with sloped faces to help deflect cannonballs, and they started featuring these rounded towers that were designed not just to withstand cannon fire, but to mount their own cannons and fire back. The age of the castle was over. The age of the artillery fort had begun.
So, if all that is true, why is our image of castles still so romantic? This quote gives us a pretty big clue. It points out that a lot of the most famous medieval castles we know and love are actually products of a 19th century fantasy about what the past was like.
This is Pierrefonds in France. For a long time, it was just a ruin. That is, until Napoleon III had it completely rebuilt in the 1800s to look like something out of a fairy tale. So what we've inherited is a romantic dream. The true story of the castle, though, isn't one of fantasy. It's one of a desperate 1,000-year-long race for pure survival.
From simple earth mounds to complex artillery forts, castle design was always a direct answer to the most urgent problems of the day. And that kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? What are the urgent problems our buildings are trying to solve right now? And what will our architecture tell future generations about us?